Incoming, the Netflix original teen comedy, takes a familiar premise and attempts to inject it with a dose of modern flair, but the results are mixed. The film, which centers around four freshmen navigating the pitfalls of adolescence at their first-ever high school party, is both derivative and, at times, unexpectedly entertaining. It's a movie that knows its roots, pulling heavily from the early 2000s teen comedies like Superbad, yet it struggles to achieve the same impact. The first half of the movie is undoubtedly its weakest point. The pacing is slow, and the humor often feels forced, which can make the opening 40 minutes a bit of a slog to get through. However, as the movie progresses, it does manage to find its footing, delivering moments of genuine heart and humor that are worth sticking around for. The film isn't groundbreaking, but it has its charms, particularly when it veers away from the expected and explores some of the more interesting side stories. One of the film's strengths lies in its cast, who, refreshingly, are played by actual teenagers rather than the usual 20-somethings that Hollywood tends to cast in these roles. Mason Thames, who plays the lead character Benj, and Isabella Ferreira, as Bailey, his love interest, share a believable chemistry that helps ground the film in reality. The authenticity of their performances adds a layer of sincerity that is often missing from other teen comedies. The friend group, rounded out by Ramon Reed, Rafael Alejandro, and Bardia Siri, is surprisingly funny and avoids the pitfalls of being overly annoying or exaggerated, a common trap in these kinds of movies. However, despite its attempts at authenticity, Incoming still falls into the trap of relying on tired tropes. The storyline is generic, and the characters often feel like they're ticking off boxes on a checklist: the nerdy protagonist, the hot older girl, the cool teacher who attends the party. It's a formula that has been done to death, and while the film occasionally subverts expectations, such as the lack of a typical fight and make-up arc among the friends, it doesn't stray far enough from the path to feel truly original. The humor in Incoming is hit or miss. There are moments that elicit genuine laughter, particularly those involving Ruby, one of the more interesting side characters. However, many of the jokes feel outdated or cringeworthy, especially the reliance on gross-out humor like the obligatory poop jokes. It's a type of comedy that might have worked better in the early 2000s, but it feels out of place in a 2024 release. The film's attempts to push boundaries, much like Superbad did in its time, are commendable, but they don't always land as intended. The result is a movie that is often more awkward than funny, though it does have its moments. One of the more surprising aspects of Incoming is the way it handles its characters. Unlike many teen comedies, the characters here are not simply caricatures. The main character, Benj, is not portrayed as the typical down-on-his-luck nerd who gets beaten up by bullies. Instead, he's a relatively normal kid with his own set of challenges. Similarly, the film avoids the cliché of having all the boys chase after the same unattainable girl. Instead, it explores different dynamics within the group, allowing for some character development that feels earned rather than obligatory. The inclusion of a subplot involving Benja's sister and her own personal growth is a nice touch, adding a bit of depth to the otherwise standard narrative. Yet, for all its attempts at depth and character development, Incoming ultimately feels like it's trying too hard to capture the magic of its predecessors. The movie borrows heavily from classics like Superbad and American Pie, but it lacks the sharp wit and memorable moments that made those films iconic. The result is a film that is enjoyable in the moment but ultimately forgettable. It's the kind of movie you might enjoy on a lazy weekend when you're not in the mood for anything too demanding, but it's unlikely to leave a lasting impression. The film's ending is another point of contention. It feels abrupt and unsatisfying, as if the filmmakers ran out of time or budget and had to wrap things up quickly. The movie concludes with a whimper rather than a bang, leaving viewers with a sense of unfinished business. It's a shame because with a more thought-out conclusion, Incoming could have elevated itself from a mediocre comedy to something more substantial. In summary, Incoming is a decent attempt at reviving the teen comedy genre, but it falls short of greatness. It's a film that has moments of charm and humor, particularly in its second half, but it never quite reaches the heights of the movies it emulates. The cast is likable, and the chemistry between the characters is believable, but the script and direction leave much to be desired. If you're a fan of the genre, there's enough here to warrant a watch, but don't expect it to become a new favorite. It's a movie that's best enjoyed with low expectations and a bucket of popcorn, a fun, if forgettable, ride through the trials of teenage life.